It was one of those soft June mornings, the kind where the breeze carries the smell of lavender and wet earth. I had just come in from watering the garden, my fingers were still damp. And my knees ached in the usual way, the gentle reminder of a body that's loved and lost and kept going anyway. That's when the phone rang. I saw Adam's name light up the screen. I hesitated for a moment. My son doesn't call often, not out of spite, just life, I suppose. He's always busy. 2 kids, a job, and Emily, always Emily. I told myself not to read into it. Maybe he was just checking in. Maybe he missed me. "Hi, sweetheart," I answered, trying to keep the warmth in my voice steady. He didn't waste a second. "Hey, Mom, I wanted to talk to you about the beach house." And just like that, my heart slipped a little out of rhythm. I stood still in my kitchen, hand on the countertop. I had baked banana bread that morning, and the smell still lingered, comforting and familiar, unlike this call. "What about it?" I asked. Adam cleared his throat. "Well, Emily and I have been talking, and her parents are visiting this summer. We were thinking it might be better if they stay at the beach house for the season." A pause. I didn't speak. He filled the silence, as he always does when he knows he's stepping into dangerous waters. "It just makes sense. They've got the grandkids most weekends, and it's a bigger space. You hardly go anymore, right?" I closed my eyes. I hadn't gone in a while, true, not since Arthur passed, but that place, it's not a summer home. It's a lifetime pressed into wood and paint and tide-worn memories. "I see," I said quietly. "You want your in-laws to stay there for the summer." Another pause. "No, Mom," he said slowly, as if I had misunderstood. "They're moving in. We've already given them the house." Silence. I blinked, unsure if I'd heard him right. "You what?" "It's theirs now," he said, as though that would explain it. As if those 3 words could undo for decades of memories, effort, love, and legacy. "We figured it was better this way. We. Not I. We. Him and Emily." I clutched the edge of the sink. My knuckles turned white. I didn't shout. I didn't weep. I just stood there, trying to make sense of what he'd just said. "Adam," I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, "what do you mean by giving them the house?" He sighed, that exasperated sound that children make when they think you're too old to understand. "I mean, the deed's already changed. We did it last month. It's all done, Mom, legally. It just made sense. They use it more and honestly, you always said you didn't need so much space anymore." I had said that, not about the house, but about my own home, in passing. Casual comments made while spooning sugar into tea. The kind of things mothers say when they think they're being agreeable. And here it was, turned against me. I felt something inside me twist. A deep ache, somewhere below the ribs. Not anger, not yet, just betrayal, a soft, stunned kind that creeps in before the fire. "I built that house with your father," I said. "With our hands. We laid every floorboard. We painted every wall. We planted that olive tree by the porch the day you were born." "I know, Mom," he said quickly, "and we're so grateful for it. But it's time it served a new chapter. For our kids, for the family, a new chapter." As if I was a footnote now, I didn't say anything more. I simply ended the call, gently, as if setting down a porcelain cup. Then I sat at the table, right next to the banana bread that no one would eat. My house was quiet, too quiet. It's funny how silence can feel louder after betrayal, I thought. About Arthur, how he worked double shifts just so we could afford the land, how he sketched out ideas on napkins at dinner, how we used to lie on the roof and name stars after places we wanted to travel we never did. Travel. The beach house became our world. And now it was gone, not lost, taken. I wanted to cry, but something else stirred instead. Not tears, not grief. Resolve. Because they may have taken the house, but they hadn't taken everything. Not yet. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rhythmic ticking of the old clock on my dresser, the same one Arthur had gifted me on our 25th anniversary. A simple thing, wood-framed and steady, never once needing repair. Unlike most things in life, my son had handed away my beach house, our beach house, like it was a used bicycle in a garage sale. And worse, he hadn't even thought I'd protest. That's what hurt most. By morning, I had made a decision. I would go to the house one last time, not to cause a scene, not to beg or plead, but to remember, to see it before it was officially filled with strangers who would never know the meaning of the walls they now occupied. I didn't tell Adam I was coming. I took the 9:30 bus to Seabrook Cove and walked the last half-mile on foot, just like Arthur and I used to when we were younger and couldn't afford gas every weekend. The path hadn't changed. The same wild grass along the trail. The same bend where we'd once spotted a baby deer. Then I saw it. The beach house. Our beach house. It stood just as we'd left it. White shutters, soft blue siding, a porch, swaying gently in the wind. But something was different. The curtains were new, bright yellow, loud, Emily's taste, no doubt. I walked up the porch steps and paused beside the olive tree. The bark had grown thick and gnarled, its branches stretching wide above me. I reached out and touched it, rough, familiar. This tree had grown with Adam. We planted it together the day we brought him home from the hospital. His first tiny cry still echoed in my memory. I let myself in with the old key. They hadn't changed the locks yet. A small mercy. Inside, I was hit with the scent of lemon cleaner and lavender. Everything was tidied, rearranged, sanitized. The shelf that once held RC glass jars was bare. The photo of Arthur and me at Cape Cod, the one with my hat blowing off, was gone. I wandered slowly through the rooms. My hand brushed along the kitchen counter, once always cluttered with cookie tins and Arthur's half-finished crossword puzzles. The cabinets had been restocked, neatly labeled. Someone, probably Emily's mother, had tried to modernize things. It felt like walking through a memory being slowly erased. Then, in the back room, I found something they hadn't touched. Arthur's study. It was always a quiet place. He'd called it his thinking room. I opened the door gently, half afraid it might creak and give me away like a thief in my own home. But no one was there. The room was still, dusty but untouched. His old desk stood by the window, the same coffee ring on the corner. I ran my hand along the wood, opened the drawer out of habit, and paused. There was a letter inside, folded carefully, yellowed with age. It was addressed to me. My hands trembled as I opened it. My dearest Ruth, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and if you're in this house, alone, then maybe it's time for you to remember something important. You built this life, not just with me, but with your own two hands. You carried this family, you made this house a home. If anyone ever forgets that, if anyone tries to make you feel like you don't matter, remember what this place really is. It's yours in soul, if not in paper. And if you ever need to reclaim yourself, start here. Love always, Arthur. I read the letter 3 times, then held it to my chest like a lifeline. My Arthur, always the steady one, always thinking ahead. A quiet sob escaped me, not of sorrow, but of recognition. In that moment, I remembered who I was, not just a mother, not just a widow, not just someone whose name was removed from a deed. I was Ruth Proudfoot, a woman who had loved deeply, worked hard, and built something that mattered. And they were trying to erase me. No, not without a fight. I slipped the letter into my bag. As I turned to leave the room, I noticed something else, a box beneath the desk. Inside it were documents, old bank records, a copy of the original deed, and something else, a handwritten note from Arthur titled, Contingency Plan, for Ruth. I didn't read it there. I tucked it into my bag beside the letter and walked out the door, calmly, quietly. Like a guest, but something had changed. They thought they had taken the house. They didn't know they had awakened the woman who built it. The tea had long gone cold by the time I pulled out the old filing box from the attic. The house was quiet, almost too quiet, and every creak of the stairs sounded like a protest. But I needed answers. Something about Adam's words, "It's theirs now," had stirred something old inside me, not anger, not yet, something deeper. I opened the box with trembling fingers. Arthur and I had kept everything. Receipts from 1983, postcards from road trips. Even faded grocery lists with notes like "Don't forget Ruth's chocolates," but I wasn't looking for nostalgia tonight. I was looking for a will. His will. Near the bottom, under a stack of yellowed documents and beach house blueprints, I found an envelope labeled in Arthur's handwriting, "Private, Ruth's copy." I held my breath and opened it. It was his last will and testament, not the copy Adam had shown me years ago after Arthur passed. This one was older, yes, but more personal. There were no lawyer's fingerprints all over it. Just Arthur's words, his voice, "To my wife, Ruth, I leave our Seabrook beach house in its entirety. This home is hers, always has been. It is not to be transferred, sold, or shared without her direct permission. She built it with me, and she should rest in it as long as she desires. This is my will." It was signed, witnessed, and notarized. I slumped onto the floor, the document in my lap, tears pooling in my eyes. He hadn't forgotten me. He hadn't left it up to Adam. He'd left it to me. So then, how had Adam gotten the authority to gift it away, unless a chill ran through me? Had he lied? The will Adam presented after Arthur's funeral had looked official. I had been too heartbroken to question it. When he said Arthur made a revised version for estate clarity, I just nodded, trusting him, trusting my son. But now I had both copies, and this one, Arthur's actual intent, proved something wasn't right. The betrayal didn't feel sharp at first. It felt heavy, a deep weight pressing on my ribs, a sadness too large to cry through. My own son. I sat at the kitchen table all night, comparing the two wills. One warm, handwritten, full of intention. The other cold, technical, filed after Arthur's passing with Adam as executor. I needed help. The next morning, I called Margaret, my friend from the church book club, who used to work for a probate attorney. I didn't give her all the details, just said I had questions about an old will. She met me at a cafe near the pier. When I showed her both documents, she didn't speak for a full minute. Then she leaned in and whispered, "Ruth, this first will is the valid one if it was never legally revoked. If you can prove Arthur never signed the second one, or if it was altered posthumously, you may have a case." I blinked. "A case?" She nodded. "To reclaim what's yours, to challenge Adam, challenge my son." It sounded impossible, terrible, yet somehow necessary. Not because I wanted revenge, but because Arthur's voice was being silenced, and I would not let that happen. That night, I returned to the beach house not as a guest, not as a visitor, as its rightful owner. The in-laws were away, attending some family event. The house was empty. I let myself in with the old spare key I still had hidden in the garden pot. Everything looked different. My bookshelves were gone, my quilt replaced with some floral monstrosity. Even the shells I collected with Arthur were packed into a box by the stairs, like they were preparing to erase me entirely. I stood in the center of the living room and whispered, "Arthur, I'm here. I'm so sorry I let them do this." And in that moment, I made a promise. They would not have the last word. I would consult a lawyer. I would gather every record. I would defend the memory of the man who built this place with his bare hands and the woman who cleaned, cried, and laughed inside these walls for over 40 years. I wasn't doing it out of pride. I was doing it for truth and maybe for something else. Closure. It had been years since I asked Adam to meet me for dinner. Usually, it was the other way around: holidays, birthdays, or when the grandkids wanted something. But this time, I made the reservation, quiet, neutral, familiar, the kind of place where the bread still comes warm and they never rush you out. He arrived late, of course, casual, confident, like he hadn't torn something sacred from me just days before. "Hi, Mum," he said, leaning in to kiss my cheek. I didn't turn away. But I didn't smile either. Adam, we sat. The waiter poured water. I didn't order. He reached for the menu, so what's this about? I pulled the envelope from my purse and placed it between us. Arthur's will, his real will. He stared at it, didn't touch it. What is that? Open it. He sighed and opened the flap like it was some minor inconvenience, like I'd handed him a birthday card from a distant cousin. He unfolded the papers and scanned them, his eyes moving faster than they should have for something this important. Then he paused. I remember this, he said finally, but this isn't the final will. No, I said, it's the true one, and you knew that. A pause. Mom, listen, that was outdated. Dad made revisions before he passed, the lawyer said. I've already spoken to a lawyer and to Margaret. Arthur never signed any revisions. The version you showed me after the funeral was never filed. Not properly. There's no record of him ever rescinding this one. His jaw clenched, but he didn't argue. Instead, he leaned back, crossed his arms, and looked away. I didn't think you'd care. The words struck me harder than any slap. You didn't think I'd care. I repeated, about my own home. About the place I built with your father? About the place where I raised you? He glanced around the restaurant, suddenly concerned with who might overhear. It wasn't personal, he whispered. Rebecca's parents needed somewhere to stay after her dad's heart attack. We had to make a decision fast. So, you gave them my house. They're family now. I'm family. He flinched at that. I saw something flicker in his expression, regret, maybe, or guilt trying to crawl its way out of him. But it was quickly swallowed by the same cold logic I'd seen in him the past few years. I had to put my family first, he said. And what am I? He didn't answer. I leaned in. You didn't just ignore my rights, Adam. You ignored his wishes. Your father trusted you. He rubbed his face, the weight of the conversation starting to settle in. What do you want, Mom? You want me to kick them out, embarrass Rebecca, destroy everything over some technicality? I shook my head slowly. No, I want you to admit what you did. And I want you to understand that what you've done, it has consequences. Just then, Rebecca arrived, perfect timing. She smiled like nothing was wrong, kissed Adam's cheek, and sat beside him. Sorry, I got caught in traffic. Did you order yet? I stared at her, trying to picture the woman who now slept under the roof Arthur built. Did she even know? Before I could speak, she looked at me and said, casually, I hope you're okay with us painting the living room. Your beach house was lovely, but it needed a little freshening up. I froze. My beach house, she laughed like it was all a misunderstanding. Well, I guess it's ours now. That's what Adam said, right? Adam didn't answer. He just stared at the table, lips tight. Rebecca turned toward him. You didn't tell her? Tell me what? I narrowed my eyes. Tell me what, Rebecca? She blinked. Oh, I just assumed you knew. We put the house in Rebecca's father's name for tax reasons. I felt the blood drain from my face. They hadn't just moved in. They hadn't just redecorated. They had transferred ownership. Adam's voice was soft, defensive. It was temporary, just to help them qualify for. I don't care. My voice cut through the table like a blade. My hands were shaking now. Not from weakness, but from something stronger. Fire. You've not only disrespected me, I said. You've dishonored your father. And for what? A few tax breaks, convenience. Rebecca's smile faded. I think we should go. Yes, I said. I think you both should. They stood to leave awkwardly. But before Adam turned away, I added quietly, you're going to hear from my attorney. And when you do, don't pretend to be surprised. He didn't speak, just looked at me with something that might have once been love but had now hollowed out into fear or maybe shame. I stayed at the table long after they'd gone, the documents still in front of me. It was no longer just about a house. It was about dignity, and I wasn't done. The house smelled different, not like the ocean breeze and lemon polish I used to know, but something artificial, candle wax and floral air freshener. I stood at the threshold of my own beach house, keys still trembling in my hand. I hadn't planned to come back so soon after the dinner with Adam and Rebecca, but something inside me said I had to, one last time. Before lawyers and legal letters began flying. It was still legally mine, and I needed to see it with my own eyes before it disappeared from my life completely. I walked slowly through the rooms. My feet almost hesitated at each step. The walls had been painted a sterile shade of gray, erasing the warmth Arthur and I had built into this place. Photographs that once hung with pride, wedding days, baby baths, holidays filled with laughter were gone. In their place were oversized framed quotes about gratitude and manifesting joy, as if replacing our memories with Pinterest slogans made it theirs. I passed through the living room, touched the side of the fireplace where Arthur had once etched our initials into the brick when we first bought the place. R+ at 1989. The letters were still faintly visible, but it wasn't until I reached the attic that I found it. I hadn't been up there in years, but the wooden pull-down ladder creaked down as if it remembered me. The air was thick with dust and the kind of stillness that feels holy. There, in the far corner, behind an old trunk and a broken floor lamp, was a weathered showbox. I don't know what compelled me to open it. Maybe it was the way it had been shoved behind everything hidden, but not forgotten, or maybe it was the faded label taped to the lid, in Arthur's familiar handwriting, "For Ruth, when you're ready." My throat tightened as I slowly peeled back the lid. Inside were letters, dozens of them. All addressed to me, "Dear Ruth," one began, dated 3 months before he passed. I know you hate talking about death, so I figured writing might be better. This beach house, our house, is more than just walls and a view. It's every argument we ever had, every reconciliation, every night we drank wine until the stars melted into the sea. I need you to know that when I'm gone, it's yours, all of it, no compromises. No debate. I've already told Adam, but just in case, here's it in writing. My fingers trembled as I flipped through the letters. Each one was a little window into the man I had loved for 4 decades. Letters about our early years, the struggle to build the print shop, the miscarriage we never spoke of, his fears about Adam's ambition, and his hopes that I'd stay strong if he went first. I clutched them to my chest. Tears came, slow and unstoppable. For the first time since Arthur died, I felt like he was still here, in this house, in these words, guarding me, warning me. There was one letter tucked at the very bottom, short, to the point. "If Adam ever does what I'm afraid he might, stand your ground, Ruth. You've always had more steel in you than you know. Don't let him rewrite your story." I read it again and again until the ink blurred. That night, I slept in the attic, on a pile of old blankets, with Arthur's words beside me. I didn't care that I wasn't welcome, that Rebecca had replaced our curtains and left live, laugh, love pillows on the guest bed. This house was still mine. And suddenly, I knew exactly what I had to do. The next morning, I packed the letters back in the box, locked the attic, and walked down the hallway with purpose. In the guest room now, a minimalist showpiece straight out of a catalog, I found my old jewelry box still tucked into the closet's upper shelf. Inside were the original deed papers, notarized, with both our signatures. Proof. Legal, emotional, and moral. But it wasn't the papers that gave me courage. It was Arthur, his voice in every line, his love in every letter. By the time I reached the front door, I wasn't a trembling mother afraid of confrontation. I was a widow reclaiming what had never stopped being hers. And I was just getting started. There's something chilling about sitting across from a lawyer, especially when your heart is carrying more weight than your hands ever could. I hadn't been in a law office since Arthur passed. Back then, it was all about sorting out his estate, making sure Adam was cared for, and that I'd be left with enough to keep breathing. But now, I wasn't here to grieve, I was here to fight. "I want to contest the transfer," I said clearly, as the young woman across from me leafed through the envelope of documents I'd brought. Deed copies, handwritten letters, photos, even a receipt from the original purchase of the house in 1989. Her name was Julia Klein. She couldn't have been more than 35 with sharp glasses and sharper eyes. But she didn't blink when I said those words. She just nodded like she'd heard 100 stories like mine but was still paying attention to everyone. "Tell me everything," she said, clicking her pen open. And so I did. I told her about the dinner where Adam looked me in the eye and told me the house was now theirs. About the renovation photos Rebecca sent me, like they were offering me a thank you card for the gift I never gave. About the letters I found in the attic. Arthur's warning from beyond the grave. Julia listened carefully, making notes, occasionally asking pointed questions. Then, after an hour of silence and scribbling, she leaned back. "Mrs. Wallace, I'm going to be honest with you. That phrase always makes your stomach lurch. There's no record yet of an official property transfer, no sale, no gift deed. The house is still listed under your name. It looks like Adam was counting on your silence." I blinked. "So it's still mine legally?" "Yes, emotionally. That's where it gets messy." A laugh burst from my chest. One of those bitter, ragged things. "Oh, Julia, it's been messy since the day Arthur died." She gave me a soft smile. But her voice was firm. "If you want, we can send them a formal notice of possession. Let them know you're asserting your ownership. They'll have to vacate if they don't have legal claim." For a long moment, I said nothing. I just stared out the window at the gray blue sky stretching over the city. Vacate. Kick my own son out of the home he filled with strangers. What kind of mother does that? But then I heard Arthur again. "Don't let him rewrite your story." My jaw tightened. "Send the notice." The letter went out 2 days later. I didn't tell Adam. I didn't call, didn't text. I let the letter arrive like a quiet thunderclap in the middle of their designer brunch. The fallout came quickly. My phone rang 13 times in a single hour. Rebecca, even Rebecca's mother. Karen, who once told me I made cluttered decorating choices. I didn't pick up. Instead, I brewed a pot of chamomile tea, pulled out Arthur's letters again, and waited. I didn't have to wait long. That evening, there was a knock at my door. Loud, fast, angry. I opened it. Adam stood there, his face flushed. He wasn't the little boy with freckles anymore. He wasn't even the man I helped build a future for. He looked like a stranger wearing my son's skin. "You sent a legal notice. Are you out of your mind?" "No, Adam," I said, stepping aside and letting him in. "For once, I'm perfectly sane." He stormed into the kitchen like he still had the right. "You want to humiliate me in front of Rebecca's family. You want to take back what you gave us." "I never gave it to you." "You said," I said, "I might consider it." "I never signed anything." "You never asked again. You just assumed. That house is ours now. We've poured money into it, time, renovation, and I poured my life into it." I snapped. "I buried your father with the sea in view from our bedroom window. I gave up years of my life so that place could exist for us, not for you to hand off like a wedding favor." His face twisted. "So what? This is revenge?" "No," I said softly. "This is me, remembering who I am." He stared at me like he didn't recognize me anymore. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't care. Later that night, alone again, I stared at the photo of Arthur in my hallway. He was smiling, holding up a bottle of wine on our 10th anniversary. Waves crashing behind him. "I did it," I whispered, and even though the wind howled outside, and my heart felt like it had run a marathon, I swear, I heard him say, "About time, Ruth, time, Ruth." I wasn't expecting her. The doorbell rang at 7:13 in the evening. Not early enough for a social visit. Not late enough for an emergency. Just that awkward in between that always makes your heart pause. I opened the door and there she was, Rebecca, dressed in her usual expensive loungewear, hair in a sleek bun, face perfectly smooth and unreadable. She looked like a woman who never cried. I used to admire that. Now, it just made me tired. "May I come in?" she asked. "I didn't move. Adam didn't send you." "No, he doesn't know I'm here." I considered her for a moment, then stepped aside. We sat across from each other in the same kitchen, where I used to serve her carrot cake and tea on Sunday afternoons. I could still picture the first time she came over, how shy she seemed, how sweet, How grateful. She wasn't any of those things now. I got your letter, she said, carefully placing her designer purse on the table. The legal notice. That was meant for Adam. Well, it hit all of us. Good, I said plainly. Because I need all of you to understand this is my house. She nodded slowly. I didn't come here to argue. I raised a brow. No, she sighed. I came here to explain something Adam never told you. Something about her tone made me lean back in my chair. Defensive, curious, braced. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded paper. It was an invoice, a contractor's estimate for renovations. Attached was a check stub, $58,000 from Adam's personal account. We spent nearly $60,000 on your beach house, she said, but not because we wanted to remodel it for ourselves. Then why? I asked sharply. Because my parents were about to lose their house, she replied. My father's medical bills have drained their savings. We couldn't let them end up on the street, so Adam offered them your beach house as a safe place to land. He said, you wouldn't mind. I felt like someone had pulled the floor out from under me. I'd known they were selfish, but I didn't realize they were liars too. You thought I wouldn't mind losing the only thing I had left of my husband? You thought I'd be okay with my son making that decision for me? Rebecca looked down. He was trying to help. We were desperate. And you think I wasn't? I stood up, fists clenched. Do you know what that house is to me? It's where Arthur and I built our life. It's where Adam learned to swim. It's where I scattered Arthur's ashes when the cancer finally won. She was quiet. I stared at her hard. Tears burning at the edges of my vision. It's not a spare room in a charity shelter. It's my home. I know, she whispered. That's why I came. Not to fight, not to convince you, to tell you that She stopped. That you what? I asked. That I'm leaving. Adam, silence. It sat between us like a dropped glass. I didn't ask for that, I said slowly. I know, she said, but I can't keep living with a man who takes and justifies. He took your house. He made it sound noble. But the truth is, he didn't ask you because he thought your voice didn't matter anymore. I blinked, her voice cracked, and now I wonder what else he's done with that same logic. For the first time since she stepped into my home, I saw her not the polished, distant woman, but the young, trembling girl I once welcomed into this family, lost, hurt, angry. Where will you go? I asked quietly. I don't know yet. She admitted, but not to the beach house. It's not mine, it never was. She stood up, smoothing her blouse. I just needed to tell you, you deserve to know. As she turned to leave, I called out, Rebecca. She paused. I wish you had told me sooner. Her eyes welled up. Me too. Then she was gone. That night, I sat on my porch with Arthur's old cardigan wrapped around me. The sky was thick, with clouds, but a single star peeked through. I thought of everything I just learned, how my son used my home as a bargaining chip, how the truth was hidden under layers of desperation and pride. But I also thought of Rebecca's eyes when she said goodbye. Maybe I wasn't the only one reclaiming their voice. Asterisk, when you reclaim what's yours, you imagine a clean break, a firm signature on a document, a quiet exit, a sigh of relief. But life doesn't give you clean breaks when family is involved. It was a Tuesday morning when I got the call from my lawyer. They've refused to leave, he said. Rebecca's parents, they're claiming Adam gave them the property, and they've hired a solicitor to argue tenancy rights in my house. I gripped the edge of my kitchen counter so tightly my knuckles turned white. What do you mean, refused? They've locked the doors, changed the locks, actually. And they say they're staying until a judge tells them otherwise. I closed my eyes, my pulse throbbed in my ears. The audacity was stunning but not surprising. I should have known this wouldn't end with one letter. That beach house wasn't just walls and windows. It was my soul, it was Arthur's memory. It was Sunday mornings on the porch, the smell of seaweed and cinnamon buns in the air, and now it was being held hostage by people who had never so much as swept the kitchen floor. I thanked the lawyer and hung up. Then I drove. The beach was gray that morning, and the sky hung low like it didn't want to witness what was about to happen. The beach house stood as it always had, modest, weather-worn, familiar, except now, there were two unfamiliar cars in the driveway. I walked up to the front porch, knocked, the door opened slightly, and there stood Rebecca's mother, Angela. A woman who had once complimented my cornbread and now looked at me like I was the intruder. "You shouldn't be here, Ruth," I blinked. "Excuse me, we've spoken to our attorney. You can't just evict people, not without notice." I stepped closer. "You were never invited here in the first place. That house wasn't Adam's to give." She crossed her arms, still blocking the door. "We're not moving until a judge tells us to." My voice dropped, cold and steady. "Then I'll see you in court." I turned and walked away, not because I was done, but because I knew staying there would turn me into someone I didn't want to be. Back home, I dug out Arthur's old files, blueprints, deeds, tax documents, the original ownership paperwork with my name on it. I had no choice now but to fight, but even as I sorted the legal weapons I'd need, grief tangled around my chest like ivy. How had it come to this? How had Adam watched this happen and stood silently in the background? Worse, how had he let them weaponize my kindness? For years, I had shown up, babysat their children, paid for their broken car, smiled through their cold silences. And when I finally said no, they barricaded themselves in my memories and dared to claim ownership. I sat down at the kitchen table, resting my head in my hands. The tears came not in sobs but in slow, silent drips, the kind that soak into your bones. But just as I began to drown in them, my phone buzzed, a message from Rebecca. "I'm sorry, I never thought they'd do this. I'm staying at a friend's. Please don't give up, you're not wrong." 14 words, that's all, but they held me like a hand on my shoulder. No, I wasn't wrong. The court date was set. 2 weeks where strangers would sleep in my bed, walk across Arthur's floors, and pretend this was their home. So I did what I had to. I drove back the next morning, not to scream, not to fight, but to remember. I stood across the street, with my notebook, watching, writing, recording. I listed every window, every crack in the stucco, every sound the house made as the wind whipped around it. I wrote about the jasmine Arthur had planted, the sea glass we collected together and kept in jars by the sink, the faded swing he built for Adam when he was 7. This wasn't just a house. It was a story, and no one, not even blood relatives, had the right to rewrite it. That night, I began writing letters, not legal ones, not threats, memories. To Adam, to Rebecca, even to Angela. I wrote about the day Arthur and I first walked through the beach house, how he looked at me with tears in his eyes and said, "I want to grow old with you here." I wrote about the birthdays, the storms, the quiet moments. I made it real again on paper, in ink, in truth, and as I sealed the last envelope, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Power. Not control, not vengeance, power. The kind that comes from standing your ground even when the tide wants to wash you away. The morning of the court hearing, I woke up long before sunrise. The house was quiet, save for the rhythmic ticking of the old mantel clock Arthur had bought me for our 20th anniversary. It always ticked slower on the hard days, or maybe that was just me. I stood in front of the mirror, buttoning the same navy blue coat I wore to Arthur's funeral. It felt right somehow, like I was carrying him with me, his memory stitched into the seams. As I walked out the door, I whispered to the wind, "Wish me strength, love." The courtroom was stark. Cold walls, hushed whispers, and at the far end of the bench, Adam. My son. He didn't look at me as I entered. Instead, he sat beside Rebecca and her parents, his eyes fixed on the table in front of him. Angela wore a smug expression. Her husband looked bored. But Rebecca, she looked away the moment our eyes met. Shame tugged at her mouth. I took my seat beside my lawyer, Mr. Hargrave, a kind-eyed gentleman with a spine of steel. He placed a firm hand over mine. "You ready?" "As I'll ever be." The hearing began. Angela's solicitor, a man with slicked back hair and no visible soul, began by asserting that the house had been gifted to her and her husband by Adam Proudfoot, and that they had taken up residence with the reasonable expectation of permanent tenancy. Mr. Hargrave stood. "Your Honor, my client is the sole legal owner of the property in question. She never transferred ownership, never signed a deed, and was not consulted when her son decided to give away a property he did not own. He handed over the original deed, my name, clear as day. No co-owner, no transfer history. It should have been enough. But then Adam stood. And he spoke. Your Honor, I understand what I did was technically wrong. But my parents always told me the beach house would eventually be mine. I just sped up the process." His voice cracked at the end, but not with emotion. With entitlement. I clenched my fists in my lap. "You didn't speed up anything," I wanted to say. "You robbed a living woman of her sanctuary," but I stayed silent for now. The judge narrowed his eyes. "Mr. Proudfoot, let me be clear. An inheritance is not a right. It's a gift, granted upon the passing of an owner, and even then only if documented properly. Are you claiming your mother is no longer living?" Adam fumbled. "No, sir, I just thought." "You thought wrong," the in-law's attorney pivoted, trying to paint me as an emotional mother who was now changing her mind out of spite. She welcomed them into her home for years. Is it really so surprising that her son assumed the property would eventually transition to the family? Mr. Hargrave stood again. "Let's not twist kindness into consent." My client did not agree. She was not consulted. Her son made a decision based on assumption, and his in-laws acted on that assumption knowing full well they had no legal right. The judge nodded. "I agree, but before I rule, I want to hear from Mrs. Proudfoot directly." My breath hitched. I hadn't expected to speak, but maybe I needed to. I stood. The silence in the courtroom was a vacuum. "Your Honor," I began, my voice steady but heavy, "that house wasn't just a vacation spot. It was my life's work. My husband and I built it together with our hands, with our hopes. When he died, it was the one place I could still feel him beside me." I paused, looked directly at Adam, "and I would have given it to you one day, not because you demanded it, but because I loved you. And I believed in my heart that you would cherish it the way your father and I did." Adam's head finally lifted. His eyes were wet, but he didn't speak. "You didn't just give away a house. You gave away my history, without asking, without thinking. And that's what hurts most." The judge was quiet for a moment, then turned to Angela and her husband. "You're to vacate the premises within 14 days. You have no legal claim. Consider yourselves lucky that Mrs. Proudfoot isn't pressing for damages." Angela opened her mouth to speak, but the judge raised his hand. "Don't. You knew what you were doing." He turned to me. "Mrs. Proudfoot, I hope this ruling brings you peace." I nodded, trying to steady the shaking in my shoulders. After the hearing, as the others filed out, Adam approached me. His face was pale. His hands trembled. "I didn't mean for it to get like this." I looked at him. "My boy, my stranger, I know," I said, "but it did and you let it." "I'm sorry." I didn't answer, not because I didn't hear him, but because sorry was too small now. He lingered, then walked away. I stood in the quiet of the empty courtroom, the echo of footsteps fading behind me. And I exhaled for the first time in months. The ocean greeted me like an old friend, not a forgiving one, just familiar. The waves rolled in with a cold honesty, reminding me that time had passed, that things had been taken, and yet I was still standing. I pulled into the gravel driveway of the beach house, my beach house. There was a moving truck parked out front. Angela's husband stood near the porch, yelling into his phone while two young men carried out boxes. She stood by the front door with crossed arms and a sour face, but she didn't dare look at me as I got out of my car. I didn't speak to her. I didn't need to. The court had already spoken. Instead, I walked toward the side path that led to the back deck, the same deck where Arthur and I used to drink coffee and argue about crossword puzzles. I ran my hand over the railing. It had been repainted cheaply. The wood grain no longer showed through. Of course, I whispered to myself. When Angela's moving truck finally drove off, a peculiar silence fell over the house, a kind of hush, like the house itself was holding its breath, unsure what I would do next. I walked through the front door slowly. It felt like a stranger's house. Plastic vases, modern rugs that clashed with the original flooring. The smell of store-bought candles lingered in every corner, suffocating the ocean air I once loved. I walked from room to room, touching walls and window frames like they were parts of a body I hadn't seen in years. In the master bedroom, my old dresser had been shoved into the closet. My seashell collection was gone, replaced by an enormous mirror rimmed with gold trim so loud, so unlike me. In the guest room, I opened a drawer and found a pair of socks that weren't mine. Just small reminders that I'd been erased here, but the biggest erasure sat on the mantel in the living room. My wedding photo with Arthur had been replaced by a framed picture of Angela and her parents, smiling on this very deck like it was theirs all along. My knees buckled. I sank onto the couch and let myself cry, not just for the house, but for everything I'd lost without realizing it. Later that evening, I made a cup of tea in the kitchen. The mugs were still in the top cabinet. Angela hadn't gotten around to replacing everything, it seemed. I sat by the window, the sky painted with dusk, and that's when I saw the envelope. It had been slipped through the front door. No name on it, just Mom written in Adam's handwriting. I hesitated before opening it. My fingers trembled. Inside was a single piece of lined paper, torn from a notebook. Mom, you don't have to forgive me. I don't expect you to, but I want you to know I'm sorry. I let people influence me. I let pride get in the way of love. You didn't deserve what I did to you. I've decided to take a break from everyone, even Rebecca. I need to figure out who I am without everyone pulling me in different directions. I don't expect you to welcome me back, but I hope one day you might answer the phone when I call. Take care of the house. Dad would have wanted that. Adam. I folded the note gently, pressed it to my chest. A long breath escaped me. Not of peace, not yet. But maybe the beginning of it. The next morning, I stood barefoot on the deck with my tea. The ocean was louder now, the waves more confident, or maybe I was just listening better. I made a list of things to change. The rugs would go, the photo frames back to what they were. I'd call Mabel down the street to help me repaint the deck properly. Maybe I'd even plant those daisies Arthur always wanted along the fence line. There was life to live here still, and I was going to live it. In the weeks that followed, I turned the house back into a home. Friends came by again, curious at first, then comfortable. The beach breeze returned, finding its way through the cracked windows and into my hair like it had years ago, and slowly, I started to laugh again. One evening, while flipping through a photo album, I found a snapshot of Adam at 10 years old, arms outstretched on this very porch, yelling into the wind, "This is our castle." I smiled through the ache. It would always be my castle, but I hadn't closed the drawbridge completely. Maybe one day, when he was ready, I'd lower it. Not for what he was, but for what he might still become. Final line, the house was mine again, but more importantly, I was mine again. I was mine again. It had been 3 months since I reclaimed the beach house. 3 quiet, slow, healing months. Most days followed the same rhythm. A walk by the shore, lunch with the radio humming, and long afternoons spent rearranging memories into shelves and frames. But that morning, I decided to tackle the last untouched room, Arthur's study. The door had been jammed for weeks. I hadn't gone near it since I moved back in. I wasn't ready, not until that morning, when I noticed the smell of old paper and cedar leaking out from underneath the crack like a whisper. I pushed it open. Dust hung in the air like mist. Everything was just as Arthur had left it, minus the obvious signs of invasion. Angela had boxed up his books and shoved his model ships into the closet. A brass telescope had been carelessly dropped on the carpet. But what caught my eye wasn't the mess, it was the painting, a large oil canvas of the bay, waves crashing against rocks. Done by a local artist we'd met in 1989. Arthur loved it, said it reminded him of resilience. And yet, something about how it hung crooked now, as if nudged recently, caught my attention. I stepped closer and lifted the edge, and there it was, a safe. Built into the wall. My breath caught. Arthur never told me about this. My hands shook as I inspected it. There was a keypad, and underneath, faint lettering carved into the metal. "You'll know the code." I sat down, staring at it like it might blink first. What was I supposed to know? That night, I barely slept. My mind kept returning to the phrase, "You'll know the code." Was it a date, a name, something he whispered in the dark when we were young and too in love to imagine betrayal? I tried every combination I could think of. Our anniversary, Adam's birthday, the date we opened the print shop. Nothing worked. By the fourth failed attempt, the safe locked me out temporarily. I leaned back on the floor, tears pricking my eyes. What secrets did he leave behind? And why hide them from me? The next morning, I opened a dusty trunk of Arthur's old notebooks, buried beneath receipts and yellowed papers. I found a leather-bound journal. It was thinner than the others, and the first page was dated April 12th, the day I almost lost her. I froze. April 12th was the day I had my miscarriage. Decades ago, before Adam, Arthur had never talked about it again. But here it was, in ink. The pages detailed everything. The way he held my hand in the hospital. The words he wanted to say but didn't. And in the final entry, dated 5 years before his death, he wrote, "She never knew how close I came to breaking that day. I never told her. Maybe I still will, in another way. Maybe one day, she'll find the date carved into the wall of my soul, and remember that love isn't always loud." I went back to the safe. I entered. 0412. Click. The door slid open with a soft hiss, like it had been holding its breath for years. Inside were two things. A stack of letters, all addressed to me, in Arthur's neat hand. And a folder labeled for Evelyn. When the world turns cruel. I sat down, stunned. The letters were undated. Some were typed, some handwritten, some smudged with what looked like tears. In one, he talked about the day Adam was born, how afraid he'd been to raise a son. In another, he warned me not to let the house go, no matter what the boy says. One letter stood out. It was clipped to a property deed, the beach house. The real deed. It had never been transferred to Adam. Not legally, not truly. Arthur had never finished the process. The paper trail Angela used in court was forged. Somehow, she'd convinced Adam to back it up. But this was the truth, and with it was a note. "If you're reading this, it means things got bad. Worse than I imagined. But if anyone can reclaim what's hers, it's you. Don't let them erase you. Evelyn, don't you dare." I clutched the letters to my chest. I hadn't just reclaimed my home. I'd reclaimed him, his voice, his faith in me, and I knew in that moment, I was never truly alone in this fight. Sometimes, the love that stays silent still speaks the loudest, even from behind a locked door. I was planting lavender. The sun was warm on my back. The sea breeze teasing the strands of my hair loose from my bun. There was peace in tending to something that needed care. Something that didn't argue, didn't accuse, didn't take. Then I heard footsteps. "Mrs. Evelyn Moore?" I turned around. A man in a gray suit stood at the edge of the garden path, holding a brown leather briefcase. "Yes." He pulled out a card. "Andrew Kerrigan, estate law." My spine stiffened. I hadn't contacted anyone yet, but I'd found the original deed. I had Arthur's letters, so why was this man here? "I represent Mrs. Angela Moore, your former daughter-in-law." "Of course, I'm not interested in games," I said, brushing soil off my gloves. "It's not a game, ma'am. It's a warning." He opened his briefcase and pulled out a file. "Your son's wife claims this house was gifted to her parents. There's a claim being filed in court next week to freeze the property." My heart stuttered. "She has no claim," I said calmly. "I agree. The evidence she submitted Let's just say it's fragile at best, but her family is trying to push it through before anyone can stop it. He handed me a copy of the petition. I scanned the names. Angela's father, her mother, and Adam's signature. Again. It was like he was letting them put a knife in my back. Again. There's more, the lawyer added quietly. She's also trying to access your pension, arguing you're unfit to handle your finances. I laughed bitterly. Unfit? At 71, I garden, hike, and cook for myself. That woman barely knows how to boil water. He didn't smile. She's counting on you, not fighting back. I looked around my home, the flower beds Arthur had designed, the wind chimes I hung on our anniversary, the windows that had seen every version of me. Then I stood tall. Well, I said, let her count again. Some wars don't start with armies. They start in gardens, with gloves off and truth ready to bloom. I invited Adam to dinner. Yes, after everything. I needed to see his eyes when I told him what I'd found, the real deed, the letters, the truth. He arrived late. No flowers, no apology, just a stiff nod and a tired, guilty face. Why did you call me here? He asked, not even sitting down. I poured wine anyway. You once said this house wasn't mine anymore. I said that it belonged to Angela's family. He rubbed his temple. Mom. I told you. I found Dad's letters. Silence. I found the real deed. He never finished the transfer. She forged documents. He warned me this might happen. His face turned pale. You don't understand what she's like, he said finally. She said if I didn't go along with it, she'd leave, take the kids. I was trying to keep my family together. I stared at him. So you offered mine instead. He looked at his wine glass. Ashamed. You're still my mother. He whispered. I let the silence hang. Then act like I am. He finally sat. The tension slowly loosened. We didn't talk about lawyers or court dates. We talked about Dad, the beach, the time Adam built a sandcastle and cried when the tide took it. I saw a flicker of the boy I'd raised, but I also saw the man I didn't recognize, the one who didn't stop Angela from breaking me. I'm not sure I can fix what's broken, he said. No, I said gently, but you can stop hammering the cracks deeper. Sometimes the dinner table becomes a battlefield, and sometimes a mirror. The storm hit suddenly that night. Winds howled like an old widow's wail through the wooden shutters. I lit candles just in case the power went out, and as I was reaching for the matches in the back of the kitchen drawer, something fell, a corner of loose wood beneath the sink. Curious, I pried it open. There, tucked beneath the warped floorboard, was a weathered manila envelope, sealed in wax. My breath caught. The handwriting on the front, Arthur's. For Evelyn, if the house ever stops feeling like home. With shaking fingers, I opened it. Inside was a letter, yellowed with time, and a small key. If you're reading this, something has gone terribly wrong. I didn't finish transferring the deed because I knew, deep down, the house belongs to you, no one else. If Adam or anyone ever tries to take it, this key opens the safe I installed behind the painting in the study. The real deed is inside, unsigned. Hold on to it, Evie. This place is yours. Always. I wept. For the man who loved me with such quiet protection, for the years lost trying to keep peace, and for the vindication buried beneath my feet all along. Some truths don't arrive in courtrooms. They arrive in secret letters hidden under floorboards. Written by the only man who ever protected me without asking for anything in return. I was sipping tea when the phone rang. Mrs. Moore, this is Brenda from Shoreline Assisted Living. I blinked. That's where Angela's parents live. She hesitated. Yes, ma'am, I thought you'd want to know. Mr. and Mrs. Hammond have been evicted. I sat up straight. What? Why? The house they listed as proof of assets, your beach house, was flagged in legal dispute. We couldn't validate ownership, and their payments stopped coming 2 months ago. The spider had spun her web too thin this time. Later that afternoon, I received a call from Angela herself. The first in months. You ruined everything, she hissed, voice shaking. My parents are humiliated. Homeless. I was calm. No, Angela, you ruined everything. I just stopped letting you lie. You think Adam will forgive this. I think Adam finally sees you for who you are. Click. I stood by the window. For a long time, watching the tide roll in and out, steady and unapologetic. I'd said nothing cruel. Just the truth. Sometimes that's enough to destroy a liar. Asterisk. She thought the house made her powerful. She never understood. It was never about the bricks. It was about what I refused to let her steal, my voice. Asterisk. The house was quiet again. No court dates. No angry voicemails. Just the hum of the sea and the slow rhythm of healing. I sat at my old writing desk and took out a fountain pen. There were things I needed to say. Not shouted in pain, but written in peace. Dear Adam, you were my boy once. You brought me flowers made of seaweed and shells, and asked if I'd always live in the beach house forever. I meant it when I said yes, I forgive you, but I won't forget. I hope you rebuild yourself not for me but for your own son, so he never feels the betrayal I felt. Come visit. If you're coming alone, the door will be open. Love, Mom. I folded the letter and placed it in the middle of the dining table, the same place where this all began. Then I walked outside, barefoot, feeling the sand underfoot. Smiling for the first time in years. Asterisk. Some endings don't come with slamming doors, just quiet letters and the sound of waves returning to shore.